enough to take me on.
And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Whatever love was, it appeared to last through the birth of two sons, William, who may one day be king, and little brother Harry, whom the British people embraced as if they were their own. The royal family had rarely been as popular. But it was popularity, Diana's, that exposed the first visible cracks in the fairy tale. Charles was rumored to feel Diana was getting all the attention when it was he who would inherit the throne. On a trip to Wales, his displeasure was thinly veiled.
I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had two wives, to have covered both sides of the street.
As the years wore on, the marriage became more threadbare. Charles and Diana made little attempt in public to hide the growing coldness between them. Diana, it would later be revealed, was suffering from bulimia, an eating disorder, and made several suicide attempts that friends described as cries for help.
I think the biggest disease this world suffers from in this day and age is the disease of people feeling unloved.
It became clear that from the beginning, the fairy tale was a sham. For all of the pomp and circumstance, Diana married a man whom it seemed loved not her, but this woman, Camilla Parker Bowles.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
In December of 1992, the royal separation was announced in the British Parliament. Diana struck out on her own, working with AIDS patients, drug addicts, and alcoholics. But the pressure of a very public and bitter divorce that went all the way to he said, she said books took its toll on Diana. She asked the public for some time off.
I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far.
But she could not escape the pressures of and interest in her personal life. Pressures that conspired on a Paris street to take away the princess and any chance of a happy ending.
Is a little less formal, a lot more approachable. Princess Diana was as American a phenomenon as anyone can get. Wherever she went, people like Anita Inglese took notice.
We watched her every move, her every thought, all the good things she did. She meant well. She was just a sad lady.
What's more American than rooting for the underdog? Diana took on the most powerful family in her land. She lost the love of her husband and her in-laws, but won the love of people she never knew.
I have a deep respect and love for her.
She was the person from England who brought the royalty down to the level of the common people.
In fact, she was so down to earth for a royal that Bunny O'Neill of Rome, Georgia, was able to buy one of Diana's dresses.
It's solid lace from one end to the other, and out of my admiration came my purchase of this magnificent dress. And my hope was that it would keep going and making money for causes that would please her, and I wrote her that.
Bunny O'Neill bought the dress for $24,000 at a charity auction last June. Diana herself came to help boost sales.
For all prospective bidders, she had a kind word to say to them, was clearly very interested in the sale and very interested in talking to people.
And she chatted with me about buying the dresses, and she hoped I'd buy one, and which one did I like. Then that's when I decided, well, I'll have a piece of this history.
The princess with the personal touch touched a lot of Americans, partly because her life was made of the stuff we love.
She came along and was suddenly this glamorous princess that everybody thinks exists, but in fact don't exist.
Americans are remembering Diana not just for the glamour, but for the work behind it. The woman behind the smile, whose life was dramatic and ultimately tragic.
The world did do somewhat important, because you don't have that many people who have such genuine universal concern.
Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, New York.
Fairy tale marriage was coming apart. Princess Diana said that while she'd given up the dream of being Queen of England, she still hoped to be a queen in people's hearts. In that, she succeeded. The world never lost its obsession with a woman who, whatever her faults, radiated beauty and kindness, vitality and vulnerability. In the end, it may have been that obsession that doomed her. A modern-day tragedy as cruel as any of Shakespeare's. CBS News will continue our coverage of the death of a princess with a special edition of 60 Minutes tonight. That'll be at 7 o'clock, 6 in the Central Time Zone. Tomorrow this morning we'll have full coverage. Died in a car crash. Had the world been as in love with a princess as it was with Diana, Princess of Wales? She and the current man in her life died in the twisted wreckage of this all but collapsed Mercedes while they were making a mad dash through Paris, trying to get away from the paparazzi who camped on her doorstep and dogged her every footstep.
I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm Worley Safer.
I'm Ed Bradley.
I'm Steve Croft.
I'm Leslie Stahl.
I'm Dan Rather. Tonight, a special edition of 60 Minutes, the life and death of a princess.
So I got off the elevator and said, what is this, the seventh inning stretch? American Express.
A princess came home. Diana, Princess of Wales, returned to Great Britain for the last time. A solemn honor guard carried her off the plane, draped in the royal standard, the flag of the royal family. Her former husband, the Prince of Wales, had made the flight with her. Last night, her life had come to a terrible end with a car crash on a Paris street. Diana, her companion, and her chauffeur were all killed. A bodyguard was in serious condition. And tonight, an empire, and indeed the world, are left to mourn the death of a princess. Good evening. Tonight we bring you a special edition of 60 Minutes on the life and death of Princess Diana. In Paris, the investigation is beginning into just what caused the horrific car crash that killed Diana and two others. Vicki Mabry has more on the sorrow that has darkened the fabled City of Light. Vicki?
Good evening, Dan. The elite force that is looking into the death of the Princess of Wales is a group that normally handles terrorist investigations. Tonight, they are developing 20 rolls of film they confiscated from paparazzi who allegedly were chasing the princess and her companions at the time of that crash. 7 freelance photographers remain in jail tonight, while much of the rest of the country mourns. Parisians and tourists alike came to see the place where the most photographed woman in the world died.
She was a person of the people, not royal. She was one of us.
It's very terrible. Terrible.
It was the same outside the hospital where her body lay. Hundreds of onlookers joined members of the press, watching as Prince Charles came with Diana's 2 sisters to take his former wife back to Britain. Her coffin draped in the flag of the British monarchy, she was given honors befitting a head of state. Moments after the motorcade left for the airport, the hospital's entrance filled with flowers and bewildered mourners. Why did you come down?
It's just sort of devastating. I mean, it's just I don't know, it's just a real shock to the system.
As soon as we heard the news, we just wanted to come down and pay a tribute, really,
The princess died in a tragic accident last night. French police say she and her companion, Dodi Al-Fayed, were trying to dodge paparazzi when their Mercedes crashed at high speed in a tunnel along the River Seine in central Paris. Al-Fayed and the driver were killed instantly, but it took more than an hour to cut Diana from the wreckage. She suffered severe chest injuries and died 4 hours later in the hospital. With an investigation underway into the role photographers may have played in the accident, there was some anger today.
I think the paparazzi are guilty. Are really guilty. This time, yes.
But most expressed sadness that her life never fulfilled its fairy tale promise.
I was hoping that she was going to find happiness at last. So, yes, it's very, very, very sad.
She sure didn't have a very good life. I mean, it goes to prove that money doesn't buy everything.
At the airport, Diana's body was loaded onto a Royal Air Force jet in a simple ceremony that contrasted starkly with her glamorous life. French radio reports that some of the paparazzi took pictures at the scene before police arrived. If so, they could face criminal charges for not assisting the injured. And if it's found that they in any way caused her death, they would face even more serious charges. Dan?
Vicki Mabry, thanks. It is a tragedy that has touched people around the world, certainly nowhere more than in her homeland. We begin with the latest from London and Tom Fenton. Tom?
Good evening, Dan. The body of Princess Diana lies in a mortuary somewhere in Britain tonight, location undisclosed. Buckingham Palace said there'll be no announcement on funeral arrangements until tomorrow. If they listen to the public, it will be a state funeral, even though she's not technically eligible for one. With the nation in mourning, the people want a national funeral. The day had unraveled in a warm mist of confusion and disbelief. The politicians, led by Britain's new young Prime Minister Tony Blair, began their tributes to a young woman whom few really understood.
She was a wonderful and a warm human being. Though her own life was often sadly touched by tragedy.
Boris Yeltsin has added his voice to
the tributes poured out from a continuous BBC News program, from archbishops, national leaders, those she had met as she strode the world stage.
She also has been a critical figure in sensitizing the public about the danger of landmines.
But those who really understood her and those she really touched were the nameless thousands who gathered to pay their respects. Some were inconsolable.
I just can't believe it happened.
Others knew there was something to say but struggled to make sense of it.
Lady Di was a great doer of good.
But from time to time, the feeling and the message just gushed out.
She represented good in this greedy, immoral world. She set out to try to help those who were impoverished, who didn't have much hope. She gave them hope. She comforted them, and she cared about them. And she might have had the trappings of wealth, but she did not abuse those trappings. She used her position to try to help those who had little to live for.
Some were stunned that Diana's death had touched them at all.
I don't think I really thought that much about the royal family until we lost her, and it's really touched me.
For others, Diana was part of their everyday life.
You looked at the morning newspaper and you saw her face there. She cheered you up a bit, you know? She cheers you up.
The brooding anger at the way she died was summed up by one simple line.
I think they should have left her alone.
The ordinary people of Britain, those who believe they adored her most and understood her best, are still standing vigil at Kensington Palace, her home in London. And as dusk fell tonight, the message one woman had attached to her tiny offering of flowers may have said it for the whole nation.
Sweetest English Rose, true princess of the people, we will miss you always. Your courage and your loving spirit will never be forgotten, and you will remain queen of our hearts forever.
She was unique. There'll never be another Diana. People here know that, and that makes it all the worse. Dan?
Tom Fenton, thanks. It's still unclear who, if anyone, is to blame for the death of Princess Diana, but it's certainly true that many people are already blaming the photographers, those in that category known as the paparazzi, who shattered the princess's every move. Harry Smith has more on this high cost of celebrity and how Diana may have paid the ultimate price for it.
Celebrity and paparazzi.
there is never one without the other. Diana found that out at the tender age of 19, when rumors of a royal romance blossomed into wedding plans.
Are you bearing up with it quite well, though? Because it must be quite a strain with all of us after you.
Well, it is, naturally.
And you're coping with it all right, though? You seem to be doing very well.
Well, I'm still around.
The bigger the star, the brighter the lights, the more intense the crush of photographers. But if you are a paparazzi, these are the cheap shots. A gleaming smile at a gala premiere is rarely worth more than a few $100s. The big money comes from pictures no one else has, like these shots of Diana with Dodi Fayed published just 3 weeks ago. Britain's Sun newspaper paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for the first clear look at the world's most famous former royal cavorting with a millionaire Egyptian playboy.
Here's Sylvester Stallone basically trying to get away from a ton of paparazzis, and they all followed him right into a store.
James Edstrom knows the value of pictures like that. He's been beaten up by bodyguards and had his fair share of high-speed chases, all part and parcel of being a paparazzi.
The problem in this business is there's no rules. Anything goes. And the dirtier the better, because that's what the tabloids like.
At first, the relationship between rising celebrity and celebrity photographer is symbiotic.
Usually when a celebrity's starting his career, you know, they make friends with the paparazzi, they pose for the paparazzi. It's only when they get real big that then they start the stuff where, no, we won't pose, get away from me, leave, and the whole bit.
That's when paparazzi turns into stalkerazzi.
They all stalkers, that's what they do, they stalk. They wait outside your house, they wait outside your hotel, and they wait to get you in a compromising position. That's what they wait for. They may be 5 blocks down the street from you, you don't even know it, and they just keep following you and following you and following you until they see they got that one shot that's gonna sell, and then that's when they're gonna nail you.
Diana's former sister-in-law, Sarah Ferguson, was a tabloid favorite. Her indiscreet behavior sold papers and made some photographers rich. Edstrom says he began to feel making money that way wasn't worth it.
Have you ever taken a picture you regretted?
I've taken a few pictures that I've regretted, but, you know, paparazzi and a celebrity is very hard. I mean, once you do it, okay, you've gotten the shot and everything, but you feel real dirty. You don't feel good. You don't feel good about yourself.
A few years ago in Spain, photographers got in fights with police, all for a few frames of Diana leaving a tennis camp. They chased her down the freeway to the airport. Even on her way to the plane, there was no escape. But there was time to accept flowers from a child. Diana was most offensive about the press when it came to her children. While skiing in the Alps, she begged the paparazzi to put their cameras away.
As a parent, could I ask you to respect my children's space? Because I brought the children out here for a holiday.
Right.
And we'd really appreciate the space.
It is said Diana was the most photographed person in the world. Yet Saturday night, 7 men on motorcycles felt they needed a few more.
I mean, I wonder how these guys are feeling right now. They're probably not even thinking. They're probably selling the photos.
Yes, even pictures of Diana dead are worth a fortune.
There's always going to be that one magazine that's going to want to run those photos. You know, no matter how sleazy they really are, because... And the photos will probably make a good $10 to $20 million. They really will, worldwide.
Diana's brother, the Earl of Spencer, holds the tabloid press accountable for her death.
It would appear that every proprietor and editor of every publication that has paid for intrusive and exploitative photographs of her, encouraging greedy and ruthless individuals to risk everything in pursuit of Diana's image, has blood on his hands today.
It would seem at some point there should have finally been enough pictures of Diana.
There were 2 other major casualties of that accident in Paris, many miles away. They were Diana's 2 children, William, age 15, and Harry, age 12. Mark Phillips reports on how the death of a princess has changed forever the young princes left behind.
Beyond the shock and sadness of today's reaction to Princess Diana's death, one question was on everyone's lips. What about the children?
The thing I feel the most sorry for are the 2 children. They're left now without their mum.
Diana wasn't just perhaps the most famous woman on the planet, she was also the most famous mother. The mother of 2 young boys, one of whom, William, was born to be king. William's now 15, Harry's 12. They were most recently seen earlier this month with their father on vacation in Scotland. And royal watchers are already speculating on what effect their mother's death will have on them on top of everything else. David Starkey is a royal historian.
One can only guess and feel sorry. And for any boy in the middle of his teens to have gone through what William has, that public, horrible, mutually damaging divorce, the humiliating revelations about both his parents, and then finally to have his mother killed with a new lover in that horrible car crash. You can't really begin to think as to what it might do. He seems a sensitive boy. He looks very like his mother. He obviously finds the role of perpetually having to stand on a stage and be watched painful and difficult. Most teenagers are desperately self-conscious, uneasy at scrutiny. Imagine having to endure, whenever you step outside that narrow little protective circle, perpetual scrutiny, and then this.
Today, the boys were shielded from public scrutiny as they were driven to a church service after being told of their mother's death. Diana's maternal role did not end with producing the royal heirs, an heir and a spare, as the saying here goes. Diana was clearly a proud and doting mother. Her fascination with her children was obvious in her response to a question on William's favorite toy on an Australian radio program.
You got a plastic whale that throws things out the top, little balls.
And if the boys, as they grew older, learned anything of the world outside the royal fold, it was her doing. Now, with William attending Eton, whose famous playing fields have helped mold the British aristocracy for generations, Diana's influence will be gone. Biographer Anthony Holden was a confidant of the princess.
Ironically, of course, Diana was on her way back to see her sons after a month apart. They've been at Balmoral with their father when the accident happened. William is just 15, his brother 2 or 3 years younger. They have benefited enormously from having a mother who, at least at one point in her life, lived in the real world. And it may sound silly to say how important it was that she took them shopping at high street stores. She made them stand in line. She made them pay for their purchases. She was trying to show them how ordinary people live. Prince Charles never had this in his own childhood.
Ironically as well, one of the results of Diana's death may be that the princes lead an even more sheltered life from now on, especially as the insatiable public demand for images of the royals is one of the factors being blamed for today's sad event. The royals may in the end close ranks, and the teenager who's now slated to one day be king may be the beneficiary of a classic closed royal upbringing.
But I have to say, for him now, the rest of his upbringing to be completed without Diana by Charles and the Queen goes back to the kind of upbringing Charles himself had, which has turned out a prince who is not for our times.
If William does grow up to be king one day, he will have been formed by experiences no previous king has ever had. And he will head a royal household and a royal institution that will have been shaped by the extraordinary life and death of his mother.
Now, in a moment, this special edition of 60 Minutes will continue with more on the death of a princess. Life was especially violent. The pictures tell the story. A Mercedes virtually destroyed by the impact. These images have left many wondering if there were any way Princess Diana could have survived it. Correspondent John Roberts spent some time today with Dr. Paul Halabian, a distinguished physician and trauma surgeon at New York Hospital, to explore that very question.
You've seen the car. Given the state of the car, what do you imagine happened to her inside it?
I would imagine being in the back seat, she became like a projectile, and then she stopped. And it was that stopping that caused the rapid deceleration, and the column of blood that was in her pulmonary vein just kept going forward a little bit and tore through the vein.
The type of injury she had is something that you've treated before. In
Yes.
your experience, what is the survival rate?
Unfortunately, it's zero survival. These people have such a significant tear and a significant hole in the vessel. It's almost impossible to get them back by the time they get to the emergency room.
Even if you get to them quickly?
even if you get to them quickly. You can sometimes get them back for a brief period of time. When I say get them back, you can get a heartbeat back. You can sometimes get some signs of brain function, but really getting the person back and saying that this is a predictable survival is 0.
What is it about this particular injury that makes it almost universally fatal?
Well, for one thing, it's one of the major vessels in your body, and it's the vessel that carries the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the heart and then gets circulated in the rest of the body. So when you lose or make a large enough hole in that, not only do you not get the oxygenated blood to the rest of the body, but you're bleeding out inside the chest, and that prevents the rest of the body from getting blood back to the heart to circulate.
She was trapped in the car for an hour and a half. Was there anything doctors could have done on the scene to save her life?
No, really not much that you can do in these kind of situations. The magnitude of the injuries is such that any effort to deal with the injuries themselves would only make it worse. Once the person gets to the emergency room, we actually open up the chest by making an incision right about here between the 4th and the 5th ribs. That's called a thoracotomy, or cracking the chest. And when we do that, we can open up and put clamps on the aorta so that any blood that we're circulating goes to the brain as opposed to the rest of the body. And if there's an obvious injury, we can actually try to sew that closed.
From what you know of this injury, in your experience, was there any way her life could have been saved?
No, I don't think so. I think that in our experience, we sometimes get people's bodies to survive, but the rest of them is very difficult to get back.
Without question, Princess Diana was the most reported about, gossiped about, and photographed woman in the world. Anthony Mason looks now at the extraordinary life of this extraordinary woman, a life that ended as a tragedy but began as a fairy tale.
She was everything we could wish a princess to be. A gracious young beauty who enticed the world with an alluring glance.
When was that last?
But we forget glamour did not come easily to Diana Spencer. She grew up in landed grace, the daughter of a Viscount and Viscountess, the descendant of earls. But she was a shy child, a bit chubby, plain, never able to outshine her 2 older sisters in school. Then in 1977, she was formally introduced to the Prince of Wales.
I remember thinking what a very jolly and amusing and attractive 16-year-old she was.
2 years later, the bashful kindergarten teacher was catapulted into the public eye as rumors spread the prince was about to propose. In February of 1981, the announcement was made. She would marry the heir to the British throne, 12 years her senior.
It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden, the transition.
It is, but I've had a small run-up to it all in the last 6 months. And next to Prince Charles and I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
We all, it seems, were at the wedding. It's estimated nearly 1 billion people around the world tuned in to watch the fairy tale unfold. That day, we saw Diana's allure was for real. Only later would we learn the marriage was an illusion. Diana soon became a mother. William was born in 1982. But when she delivered her second son, Harry, 2 years later, the princess was already suffering from bulimia and had attempted suicide. Charles reportedly was growing resentful of his wife's celebrity.
She was a real person to us. She was the people's princess, and right from the beginning, she talked to people as if she was an ordinary person, not some member of the royal family.
The royal couple continued to tour the world, but soon they could no longer hide the coldness between them. Charles would later admit the marriage was breaking down.
I mean, any breakdown of a marriage is obviously a dreadful thing, and unfortunately causes great unhappiness and consternation and everything else inevitably. So I suppose at the same time it's inevitable that in the wake of something like that you get all sorts of turbulence. I mean, I knew perfectly well. I mean, one of the difficulties I find about this life is the predictability of what so many people are going to say about anything at any time. And but I mean, it's difficult for me to know. Obviously, I'd much rather it hadn't happened. And I'm sure my wife would have felt the same.
Charles had resumed a relationship with married former girlfriend Camilla Parker Bowles, while Diana's own affairs were also becoming public knowledge. By 1992, when the release of Andrew Morton's book, Diana, Her True Story, betrayed the last secrets of the crumbling royal marriage, Buckingham Palace decided it was no use pretending anymore.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
Please, no.
With the paparazzi prying ever more into her private life, Diana reluctantly decided to cut back her public schedule.
I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
But her self-imposed exile did not last for long. Wherever she went, Diana knew the cameras could not keep quiet, and she used the glare of the flashbulbs to shine light on causes that had become dear to her. In 1993, she visited a West London shelter for battered women.
I mean, you were saying that one minute he'd be hitting you, the next minute he'd be crying. Yes. And then you'd have to be the mother. Yeah. Having been the abused wife before. Yeah.
Buckingham Palace had slowly been reducing Diana's royal duties. So the princess began to imagine a new role for herself.
I've been in a privileged position for 15 years, and I've got tremendous knowledge about people and how to communicate. I've learned that. I've got it, and I want to use it. And when I look at people in public life, I'm not a political animal, but I think the biggest disease this world suffers from in this day and age is the disease of people feeling unloved. And I know that I can give love for a minute, for half an hour, for a day, for a month, but I can give, and I'm very happy to do that, and I want to do that.
Do you think that the British people are happy with you in your role?
I think the British people need someone in public life to give affection, to make them feel important, to support them, to give them light in their dark tunnels. I see it as a possibly unique role. And yes, I've had difficulties, as everybody has witnessed over the years, but let's now use the knowledge I've gathered to help other people in distress.
Do you think you can?
I know I can. I know I can, yeah.
The best way to clear the mine is to dig a trench and simply scrape it away.
The charities she supported knew she could. Lord Jeffrey Archer worked with Diana on many charitable campaigns.
The vision for this country and for the British people is always going to be a staggeringly beautiful and classy lady who was so much more than that because she was willing to expose and espouse causes she believed in and get behind charities she believed in, and she made a difference. And there aren't many people who do that.
This princess lived in a palace, but was never afraid of the people. She reached out to them, and everywhere, they responded to her. Royal watchers like Ingrid Seward of Majesty magazine knew from the beginning Diana was different.
Did she become something beyond royalty?
She was Hollywood and royalty. She was Vogue magazine meets Mother Teresa. She was just something that we'd never experienced before. She was almost sort of holy in a way.
We know now the fairy tale ended long ago. The royal family did not allow Princess Diana to become a queen. So she became an icon.
Princess Di better than the former publisher of the Washington Post, Katharine Graham. Among other things, she played tennis with Diana at Martha's Vineyard. Earlier today, up at the Vineyard, Mike Wallace spoke with Mrs. Graham about the princess.
I found her charming, delightful, easy, and this
That's
is
the
very
quality. That's the quality. She was easy.
She was very human.
Yeah.
She was trying, and she was so lovely in her nature, and she was very easy up here. She said to call her Diana, which it took me a while to be able to do, but I did. And we had a very ongoing and nice relationship.
She was a breath of fresh air in the somewhat musty British royal family.
Yes, it's too bad that they didn't get along. She was 19, as you remember, when she was married. Imagine 19 years old and marrying into that situation.
And all of that pressure.
And she said, and I think it's true, I got absolutely no help from anybody.
Why?
I don't understand it, but I think it's probably true. And a 19-year-old in that difficult situation certainly needed a lot of help and advice.
She was obviously devoted to you because she came to your 80th birthday party, although looking at you now, it seems implausible.
She did, but I want to emphasize that that was because she was coming over here for the Red Cross, and she came a few hours early, and she did come to my birthday party with the Fletcher de Limas, who are mutual friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very nice, and I was very pleased, and everybody was pleased to have her, and she made an effort to be here.
She played tennis on your court.
She did. She said she wanted to play tennis, and one day my friend Rose Styrman called and said, we need a fourth. And I said, well, just a minute, I think I can find one. And I called her and said, do you want to play tennis in 3/4 of an hour? We need a fourth. And she said, you've got one. And she came, and she did it. She played tennis. And
Pretty good?
Quite good, yes, and a lot of fun.
Competitive?
Yes. I think to the point of what balls were in and what balls were out. And
that's a tennis player.
That is.
That's a serious tennis player.
But we had a lot of fun.
Jeffrey Archer, Lord Jeffrey Archer said this morning on television from London that she is irreplaceable in the UK.
I think that that's so true. I hadn't thought of it in that way at all. Of course, I'm not as familiar as he would be with Great Britain, but she really undoubtedly played a role. It was a controversial role, Mike, as you know. Not everybody admired her, and a lot of people disapproved of her. Mm-hmm. A lot of establishment people said that they knew what she was like, and they didn't like her. But I didn't know her intimately, obviously, but it seemed to me that she was doing her best to be of use to the world in a very difficult situation.
Someone called her the People's Princess, not the establishment, the People's Princess.
I think that she certainly was trying to be that, and to some extent I think she cooperated with the press to some extent in those situations. She certainly gave interviews, and she tried to promote causes. She sold her dresses for charity.
And she was very active in the AIDS community.
She was very active in health issues, and certainly very human. She went here on the Vineyard and in other events to be with people who were dying of AIDS. And of course, as you know, she went all over the world in behalf of AIDS. She was going to Thailand this fall in behalf of the Harvard AIDS Institute and Research Institute. And she told me an interesting thing. She said, you know, if I'm going to say something about anything, I want to see it. Mm-hmm. And that's why she went to really difficult parts of the world looking at what landmines did to people, because that was her other interest. And I think the landmines issue is a very valid issue, and she was very strong in its behalf. And then she was very interested.
And went to Bosnia to find out about it.
Yes, she did.
Her brother Earl Spencer, down in Cape Town, South Africa this morning, said, I always believed the press would kill her in the end.
Well, I think it's obviously more complicated than that. We don't even know what happened yet, Mike, do we? We know...
All we know
they
is...
tell us the paparazzi were pursuing her, and I'm prepared to believe that, but nobody yet has told us why they know it, or if they know it.
That's true, but they have detained 7 paparazzi.
Well,
the French have.
If what they say happened, it certainly was bad. There is no defense of the behavior of paparazzi in certain circumstances. Mm-hmm. It has to be said that they are commercial people mostly who are looking for a big price for a photo. They are not particularly representative of the press, and some of them don't even represent the press at all. They're just people out with a camera looking to make a buck.
Knew Princess Di as well as Catherine Graham. Few people in Britain, outside the royal family, knew Prince Charles better than Jonathan Dimbleby. He spent part of this afternoon with CBS's Tom Fenton.
Jonathan Dimbleby is a British journalist who became a close friend of Prince Charles when he wrote his biography and made a documentary film about him.
What effect do you think
the death of Diana will have on him?
Well, I can feel pretty certain what he's feeling at the moment, which is bound to be continued shock, a horror at what has happened, combined with a sense of responsibility in the middle of that pain, both as a father and as a public figure who has now to go through serious public duties. He has a great deal of inner strength, and I think he will be capable of doing that, but to pretend it won't be extraordinarily difficult would be daft, of course.
What's going to be the most difficult part?
Well, he's already had pretty considerable difficulties. It doesn't take much imagination to see what it must be like to have to wake up your young children in the middle of the night and tell them that their mother has just died. He is an extremely sensitive man, and I'm sure he will have done that in a way that other fathers, if such a terrible situation arose, would hope themselves to be able to do it. However, you are also dealing with two young princes who are in the public eye, because this is a public family. This is part of the whole dilemma of the relationship between the public and an institution like the British monarchy. And there is going to be continuing and very close interest. The Prince of Wales's task, amongst others, is to help his children through that and to get through it himself, because we do enter a changed world, and it's very difficult to peer through the appalling gloom of today and see what that world is going to be like. But that it will be different, there can be no doubt, and it's not going to be at all easy.
It was apparent from these pictures taken a few weeks ago of Charles and his sons on holiday in Scotland that Prince William, even then, found the media attention difficult.
William. William.
Won't Prince William be left with the idea that the press hounded his mother to death?
I think it's very likely that he may feel that. He is a reserved boy. He's extremely intelligent and he is sensitive. I think he must feel very strongly both that his father and that his mother have found in different ways that press attention very difficult to take. And he's had that himself and finds it difficult. He is bound now to feel that was done by the media. Whether that is true or whether it is not true, part of the task of those around him will be to persuade him that even if the media has contributed in some way to this horror, that he has to live with the media, because he is going to be one day on the throne of the United Kingdom.
You've seen Prince Charles with the young princes. What kind of a father is he?
He's very much like any other father. Beforehand, I had read that he was cold and reserved with his children. When I look at what I've seen in the context of what he now faces, I am, as a father myself, encouraged. He gets irritated with his children, like many fathers get irritated with their children, but he cuddles them, he has them on his lap, he touzles their hair, they horseplay, and they mess around in the way that healthy parents and children do. I am absolutely convinced, therefore, that he can bring his reserves of courage and inner strength, combined with his natural ability as a loving parent, to help them through this trauma.
Jonathan Dimbleby says that the princess's death has come at a time when, after all the squabbling, she and Charles had finally achieved an amicable relationship.
It's important to understand, I think, that the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales, though they were divorced, had acquired a way of living with the fact of that divorce, which involved mutual respect and a degree of dignity. And I believe that their relationship, therefore, was much better than it was sometimes depicted. The Prince of Wales cared, and that's why he will be suffering now. He cared for his wife, his former wife. He wanted her to find happiness. He wanted her to be able to fulfill her potential in the way that she wanted. And again, that is, I think, has to be put into this equation when one seeks to understand how he is going to cope with the problem of her death.
Princess Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, very bitterly blamed the press today. Do you think that's fair?
I don't think that one can easily simply charge proprietors with having blood on their hands. I wouldn't use that phrase, but then I'm not her brother. I would say that they have a huge responsibility to re-examine their values. And there is something slickly nasty about some of them who have come out with crass phrases over the years saying, oh, it's in the public interest, when they have intruded disgracefully, when they have lied, when they have distorted or allowed others to distort, and the checks roll in as people buy their newspapers and they go on to greater and greater things. And very few of them are entirely exempt from that charge.
Well, there are people who said that she was not only used by the media, but she used them herself. I mean, was she in fact her own victim?
She did, as it were, live by the media to a very great extent. Now, it is too cheap a thought to say that, as it were, she was destroyed by the media. She clearly wasn't destroyed by the media. She was killed in a terrible car accident. But the relationship that she had with the media was at one level caught in a horribly ironic way by that tragedy last night.
And what of Charles's future? It was in an interview with Jonathan Dimbleby that he first publicly admitted his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. Charles now tragically is a widower and perhaps is free to marry Camilla Parker Bowles. Do you think he'll make that step?
I don't believe anyone knows the answer to that question except himself. And I don't believe he has shared with anyone his private views about that. I think at the moment that issue is, I am quite certain, the last that is in his mind, because he will be concentrating on his children and he'll be concentrating on trying to pick up the pieces of this tragedy, both privately and what is for this nation a public tragedy, as it is for many people around the world for whom the princess was an icon.
What effect do you think her death will have on the royal family?
Accidentally, it is possible that the absence of a great star, of an outstanding and remarkable public world figure, will help the royal family to come to terms, because it'll be under less close scrutiny and focus, because it will be less exciting for the world's media than it was. That may not harm the royal family. It may be rather good for the children, the young princes, and it may be of benefit to the monarchy as well.
Morning, Eleanor Mondale spoke with someone who knew Diana well and knows well the perils of celebrity, actress Elizabeth Taylor.
What was your first reaction when you heard about Princess Diana's death?
Oh, God, total disbelief, horror, pain. I think the whole world is in a state of shock and grief. And I know what it's like to be chased in a car by the paparazzi. And it's one of the most frightening, claustrophobic making feelings in the world, because you have no place to go. You're in a car, you're going faster and faster to try and get away from them. They can shoot through darkened windows, and you end up in a corner of the car. And she must have known such fear. It makes me so angry.
What would you say to the editors of these tabloids that are thinking about running these?
They're responsible. The paparazzi were feeding them. Without those magazines, they wouldn't be the paparazzi. And it's getting worse and worse. It finally caused the death of the world's princess. She helped people. She made a difference. Why couldn't they let her be? Maybe she'd finally found happiness.
Is there anything you'd like to say to their families or her family?
Yes. I know how awful it's going to be for her children. She was such a wonderful mother. And she would have been a great supportive
I can't talk. I just feel so sorry for their whole family, but especially your little boys. And I wish them luck and love.
We invite you to continue watching this CBS station for what we deem happiness and dreams gone tragically wrong. Not all fairy tales have happy endings. Not in the stories by the Brothers Grimm, not in the short life of Diana, Princess of Wales. 16 years ago, she captured the world's imagination. The shy kindergarten teacher picked by a prince to be his queen. She was elegant and glamorous, a royal star for magazine covers and newspaper headlines. The tragedy, of course, was that although the camera loved her and the people loved her, her prince did not. And the cameras that originally followed her for her glamour and beauty began to pursue her for tales of scandal, bulimia, and near suicide. After her divorce last year, Diana seemed to be a woman transformed. Without her royal title and her official job, she invented a role for herself. As Prime Minister Tony Blair said today, Diana became the people's princess. Diana took up causes from AIDS awareness to the international ban on landmines. If cameras were going to follow her everywhere, then Princess Diana would take them to places where they would focus on her issues. She would use her celebrity to do good. That should have been, could have been, the happy ending to Princess Diana's fairy tale. Instead, it all ended with a chase and crash in a Paris tunnel. A victim of the uncontrolled cult of fame and celebrity gone mad. And tonight in Britain, there are two boys without a mother, and an old nation mourning the young woman who said she wanted to be a queen in people's hearts. I'm Dan Rather. We'll be back next week with another edition of